So it's an economic issue, climate change. It's also a business issue. It has to be seen as an issue for businesses. And why is it an issue for businesses? Well, partly because, of course, it's an economic issue, and, you know, as the effects of climate change start to be felt, they will have a serious impact on businesses. And when I write about climate change, I'm very careful to present it in these terms. It's also a political issue, of course. You know, at the highest levels of government, people are now taking an interest in this. Gordon Brown, whose visit to Brazil, I think, was a little bit overshadowed a few days ago. President Obama is making an enormous difference. You know, he, in his inaugural speech, he mentioned climate change. He put it right up there. He's put climate change into his budget. He's appointed some very, very senior academics, some very interesting people who know an enormous amount about climate change, to very senior positions within his administration. You know, he's signalled very firmly how seriously he takes this. In the UK as well, it's becoming a sort of an issue for the public, an issue of public protest. Ed Miliband, our climate change minister, was saying the other day that, you know, that he wanted a mass movement of people to press for change on climate change, to press for action on climate change. And he seems to have got it. You know, we've got Greenpeace in the UK organise protests at power stations. Different groups have organised protests at airports, which have brought airports to a standstill. You know, it's bringing people out onto the streets now as an issue. You know, and we're going to see that even more at the G20. Because there's a lot of protesters in London who are preparing to, you know, come out and protest at the G20 meeting about climate change, and that's happening right now. So we can see that this is becoming, you know, in some places at least, a mass movement. Just one other issue that's extremely important in terms of how we present climate change, how as journalists we should present climate change. And that's that climate change is a national security issue. Climate change can lead to conflict. The Intergovernmental Panel on Climate Change, in its report in 2007, estimated that 500 million people would be afflicted by famine as a result of climate change. Now that's a lot of people. And even more people will be affected. They will not actually, you know, be sort of dying of starvation, but they will find agriculture impossible in the areas that they're in. They will have to move. There will be a mass migration of people from the areas that are worst affected by climate change, and that's going to happen if we let temperatures reach 2 degrees, you know, 2 degrees more, then we will see that kind of mass migration of people, because life will become impossible. Agriculture will become impossible in some areas. It will become too hot, water will become too scarce, and people will have to move. And when people go on the move, as we've seen in places like Darfur, in other places around the world, when people are forced to go on the move like that, what happens is you get conflict. And you will find conflict worsening in many areas of the world. You will find migration, you will find developed countries trying to close their borders, you will find developing countries, people in developing countries trying to move. And that's going to be a very seriously destabilising problem around the world, and governments are going to have to deal with that. While I'm talking about how we can present climate change, one little slightly lighter-hearted issue is the number of celebrities who are now getting into climate change. I mean, I don't know what kind of media you're from, if there's anyone here from tabloid newspapers, but you know, the fact that we now have people like Leonardo DiCaprio, George Clooney, Al Gore, you know, making himself a big celebrity, you know, Al Gore organising concerts where Madonna plays and so on, about climate change. That is an issue that's making climate change accessible to a different audience, a completely different audience. It's not an audience that the Financial Times deals with very much, so I don't have much experience of this, but it means that all parts of the press, even the down market, the tabloid side of the press, has a hook for dealing with climate change. Just quickly then, I've been asked to talk a little bit about the sources of information that I tend to use. So briefly, NGOs, Greenpeace, people like that are an incredibly important source of information for me. Academics also, we've got a lot of very distinguished academics producing reports on climate change all the time, which are immensely valuable. Finally, just my last point is the financial crisis. Now, as the Financial Times, obviously the financial crisis is a pretty big story for us, and as a result of that, some of the other issues have been pushed to one side. However, the financial crisis is hugely important for climate change, and climate change is hugely important in the financial crisis. The reason for that is that we're about to do an enormous bailout. I mean, as we've heard earlier, we're about to spend trillions of dollars on, restarting the world's economy. If we spend those trillions on the kind of infrastructure that we already have, on roads, on airplanes, on big cars, big inefficient cars, on coal-fired power stations and so on, then that infrastructure is a high-carbon infrastructure, and it will be with us for the next 50 years. And if we spend the money in that way, it will become impossible to bring ourselves back down onto a low-carbon path. So it's vital that this money is spent on a low-carbon infrastructure, which means renewable energy, public transport, more efficient cars, railways, cleaner power. These are the things that this money can be spent on, and we're seeing that is happening in some places. President Obama in the United States has taken an enormous interest in this. He's introducing a massive investment in energy efficiency, because the United States is very inefficient at the moment. And that not only helps the economy, not only provides jobs, but puts us onto the path of a new low-carbon economy, which must be the future. So the financial crisis presents us with a huge threat of carrying on in the way that we've been going on a high-carbon path, and a huge opportunity. And we're at very important crossroads at the minute for that. And the importance of this can really not be overstated. Just one final point to end on, which is that it's very easy in this kind of journalism to see climate change just as a terrible problem, and to be very gloomy, to talk, doom and gloom, and how dreadful it's all going to be. I think it's extremely important to present climate change not just as a problem, but as a problem with solutions. And at the Financial Times, whether we're talking about climate change or any other issue, we never talk about it just as a problem. Our readers are business people, they are politicians, they are can-do people, they are people who see themselves as the people who go out and try to, change the world every day. And they don't want to be just presented with a problem, they want to be presented with the possible answers to that problem. And I think it's very important to do that. I think it's very important for all of us to do that, to present this as something that we can do something about. We can remake the world. And, although, the threat is huge, it's amazing as well that we have the opportunity now to remake the world. Thank you very much.